Hello listeners and welcome to the first program in a series of 5 brought to you by NAMCOR. My name is Jacqueline Gonzalez. The aim of these programs is to assist grade 8 learners as well as others who are interested in improving their English language skills. This program is designed to help you, our learners, develop your ability to summarize passages. In paper 1 of your examination, the summary writing question has proved to be the most challenging. However, if you have mastered the skill of summary writing, you can do very well in this question. We have invited an expert teacher, Miss Claassen, to take us through the nitty-gritty of summary writing. But before we start, why don't we have some music while you go and grab a pen and paper? Because at the end of today's lesson, there will be a quiz with great prizes up for grabs. Welcome back and let's join our guest, Miss Claassen, who will take us through a few techniques on summarizing. Miss Claassen, we know that summarizing is the ability to produce a condensed version of information and that the summary should include only important elements and retain the order of the original information. But keeping this in practice is a challenge. What is the secret?
Well, Jackie, when you summarize, you need to first choose what's important in the text. Look for the main ideas, and a good way to do that is to look at what the author refers to over and over again, because that's probably what's important. Then secondly, you then need to condense those main ideas. You need to get rid of the repeated ideas. You need to exclude those little details that are in there to keep you interested, but really don't contribute to the main idea.
Miss Claassen, this is where it becomes tricky. You've now identified the important ideas, and how do you begin to put them down on paper?
Different readers use different methods, but one great way to start summarizing is just to turn to someone else and say, "Hey, I just read this. Listen to what the author's talking about." From there, you can list some of the main ideas, and then if you need to write a formal summary to give to someone else, you can kind of look for the connections between those ideas and then use those to frame your summary.
Miss Claassen, is it a common practice for most learners to write the topic of a text when they're asked to write a main idea? Now, what's the difference between the topic and the main idea?
Well, the topic is usually just one word or phrase to which everything in the text refers to. So, for instance, if you were reading about rhinos, the topic of the book could be rhinos. A main idea is usually a sentence that explains why the topic is important or explains something about the topic. So one article about rhinos might be, "Rhinos poach for their horns." And so then everything in the text would go back to that main idea.
Do you find these techniques of summarizing to be helpful at all to English learners?
Oh, definitely yes. One method that I find quite helpful for learners is looking for key words in the article or text. And so we would kind of develop their background knowledge first, and then they would look for key words that were important. And using some of these techniques, like finding the main idea and looking for the structure of the text, help them to, by the end of the year, write some really competent summaries. And that really shows they got an understanding of the text.
What would a bad summary look like?
Oh, Jacqueline, a lot of learners use what's called the copy and delete method. Oh, geez, I have to write this summary. I don't really know how. I'm just going to go through and pick up a few sentences here and a few sentences there, copy it down. I leave out a few sentences, and I have something that looks like a summary. So, when you're seeing a lot of text, that's directly taken out of the main article. You can tell that the writer of that summary isn't working with very effective strategies for summarizing.
This is very enriching information, Ms. Claassen. Thank you very much for taking time to share these useful tips with us.
It's my pleasure. Listeners, I hope you've learned a skill or two. No one says any of this is easy, but you just need to focus and be determined.
Well, you've heard it from the expert, Ms. Claassen. Let's sum up what we've learned today. When you summarize, you need to first choose what's important in the text. Look for the main ideas. You need to condense those main ideas. You need to look for connections between these ideas and use them to frame your summary. You also need to look for keywords in the article or text. Well, we've come to the end of today's lesson. Now it's quiz time. Here's the question. Choose only one answer. Which of the following statements is false? When you summarize, you need to A. Choose what is important in the text. B. Include repeated ideas. C. Look for main ideas. D. Retain the order of the original information. Here's the question again. Choose only one answer. Which of the following statements is false? When you summarize, you need to A. Choose what is important in the text. B. Include repeated ideas. C. Look for main ideas. D. Retain the order of the original information. We've come to the end of today's program. Many thanks to you, our listeners, for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed this program. Join us for our next program when we will discuss tenses. Make sure not to miss our second broadcast. From me, Jacqueline Gonzalez. Until next time, toodles.
The Education Radio Initiative is possible with support from the Ministry of Education as part of the Education and Training Sector Improvement Program.
Let's summarize what we've learned today. We use the present simple tense to talk about things we do often or repeatedly, general truths or facts, situations. Hello listeners, and welcome to the third program in a series of 5 brought to you by NAMCO. My name is Jacqueline Gonzalez. The aim of these programs is to assist grade 8 learners as well as others who are interested in improving their English language skills. In the last program, we look at the uses of the simple present tense.
We've come to the
this
end of
program,
today's lesson.
we'll move
Now
on to the
it's
simple
quiz time.
past
Here's
and
the
simple
question.
future tenses.
Which one of the
Remember
following
that all
statements
verbs
is not
show
true?
tense and
We
fall
use the
into a
present
broad
simple tense
division
to talk
of
about
time,
A,
past,
finish actions,
present, or future.
B,
So to
things we
get
do
information
often or
about when the
repeatedly,
action or
C,
state of being
general
occurs,
truths or
all you have to
facts,
do is to look
D,
at the form of the
mental
verb. In
states.
other words,
Here's the
it's
question
tense.
again.
That is why we
Which
are
one of the
exploring
following
all
statement is
simple
not true?
tenses.
We use
At
the
the end
present
of this
simple
program,
tense to talk
you will be
about
able to
A,
use the
finish
simple
actions,
past tense
B,
and simple
things we
future
do
tense
often or
correctly.
repeatedly,
But before we
C,
start,
general
why don't
truths
we
or
have some
facts,
music
D,
while you
mental
go and
states,
grab a pen and
E,
paper,
physical
because
states,
at the
example,
end of today's
Mary
lesson
catches
there will
the
be a
ball.
quiz again.
Well, listeners,
Welcome
we've come to
back.
the end of
Let's
today's
listen to
program.
Mandy in
Thanks
her
for joining
mission
us.
to
And I
assist
hope
her
you've
brother
enjoyed
Kevin,
the
who is
program.
preparing
Join
for a
us
test
For
on
our
tenses.
next program,
where we will discuss more on tenses. Make sure not to miss our third broadcast.
Now
From
we'll
me,
move on to
Jacqueline
simple
Gonzalez.
past
Until
tense,
next
Kevin.
time, bye-bye.
The Education Radio
So
Initiative
we
is
use the
possible with
past
support
tense
from
to
the Ministry of
express actions
Education
that
as part
happened
of the
in
Education and
past
Training Sector
over
Improvement
a period
Program.
of time.
Do you mean everything that happened already?
Yes, that's right. We use the past simple to express actions or events that took place and were completed in the past. It can be the distant past, like a month ago, or even the recent past, like this morning. For example, yesterday we watched television.
Okay, I think the past tense is the easiest as you only use it for one purpose.
Not really. We can use it to talk about a specific point in time. For example, she came back last Friday. It can also be used to talk about a period of time. For example, she lived in Tokyo for 7 years.
Ah, I see. Which time words will tell us that we must use the past tense?
Well, words like yesterday, in those days, at that time, during lunchtime, last week or last month, a year ago, 2 weeks ago, and so on.
So, all the time expressions people often use, for example, from March to June, for a long time, for 6 weeks, in the 1980s, and in the last century, refer to the past.
Yes, Kevin, correct.
And how do we form the simple past tense?
Now that's a good question, bro. There are 2 types of past forms in English. Those for regular verbs and those for irregular verbs. All regular verbs have similar endings, ed, d, or ied. These endings are added to the base form, the main or root word. For example, cook, cooked, smile, smiled, and worry, worried. Irregular verbs do not make the past form by adding ed, d, or ied. Some, however, have the same base and past form. Some change vowel sounds, and a few have completely different base and past forms. For example, beat, beat, break, broke, and go, went.
So, irregular ones are tricky, yo. I have to learn them by heart. Please fill me in a little bit on future tense too. I still have to revise all 3 tenses.
All right, dear. So we use the future tense to anticipate things to happen in the future or to stress an intention, something we want to do.
An intention? Is that something we want to do?
Oh, yes. For example, we will write the test on tenses tomorrow, or she will come next week.
So we must use words like tomorrow and next week to indicate that it is in the future.
Well, the time words that indicate future tense are tomorrow, next week, or month or year, this coming Friday, in 5 years' time, at the end of the year, and so on.
And we form the future tense by adding shall or will to the present tense verb, right?
Oh, yes, bro. Traditionally, shall is used for the future tense with the first person pronouns, I and we. For example, I shall and we shall. Whereas will is used for second person, you, and third person, he, she, it, and they pronouns. So he will, she will, they will. Now the word will is used to express future events or expectation, to refer to a present intention, make a decision or express willingness. whereas shall is used otherwise only when we wish to express determination or to emphasize a certainty and to get someone's opinion or permission.
Ah, I see.
And what's more, there are other phrases that we can use to refer to the future. These phrases are going to, about to, on the point of, and due to. We use them like this. The traffic is terrible. We are going to miss our flight, meaning we won't make it. Or, I think the movie is about to start now, meaning it is going to start now. Or, our teacher is at the point of resigning, meaning it will happen very soon. And one more. Our class is due to start in 10 minutes, meaning it will definitely happen.
I think in my school, the one which is used most often is going to, not will or shall.
I agree. We use going to when we want to talk about a plan for the future. For example, I'm going to see him later today. Or in 10 years' time, I'm going to be a boss of my own successful company. We also use going to when we want to make a prediction based on evidence we can see now. For example, look at those black clouds. It is going to rain soon.
Well, Sissy, I must admit I've really tapped on your intelligence today. Thank you very much. I feel so confident now. See you.
I'm glad, bro. I shall be waiting for that 100% on Friday, hey? We had an agreement. Go and clean my room.
Hey, about that.
Well, listeners. Mandy should consider a career in teaching. She really came through for Kevin. Let's summarize all she said today. We use the simple past tense to talk about actions that happen in the past, actions or events that took place and were completed in the past, a specific point in time, a period of time. How do we form the simple past tense? There are two types of past tenses form in English, those for regular verbs and those for irregular verbs. All regular verbs have similar endings, ed, d, or ied. These endings are added to the base form, which is the main or root word. Irregular verbs do not make the past form by adding ed, d, or ied. Some have the same base and past form. Some change vowel sounds and a few have completely different base and past forms. We use the simple future tense to anticipate things to happen in the future or to stress an intention, something we want to do. How do we form the simple future tense? We form the future tense by adding shall or will to the present tense verb. Shall is used for the future tense with the first person pronouns I and we, whereas will is used for second person you and third person he, she, it, and they pronouns. Will is used to express future events or expectations, to refer to a present intention, make a decision, or express willingness, and shall is used only when we wish to express determination or to emphasize a certainty and to get someone's opinion or permission. Well, my listeners, we've come to the end of today's lesson. Now it's quiz time. Here is the questions for today's program. Which one of the following choices show the two types of past forms in English? A. Modal verbs and regular verbs. B. Regular verbs and irregular verbs. C. irregular verbs and modal verbs. D, helping verbs and regular verbs. Here's the questions again. Which one of the following choices shows the two types of past forms in English? A, modal verbs and regular verbs. B, regular verbs and irregular verbs. C, irregular verbs and modal verbs. D, helping verbs and regular verbs. We've come to the end of today's program. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you've enjoyed this program. Till next time.
The Education Radio Initiative is possible with support from the Ministry of Education as part of the Education and Training Sector Improvement Program.
Hello listeners, my name is Jacqueline Gonzalez. In the previous lesson, we looked at grammar, but this program will further pupils' understanding of the literary terms such as theme, point of view, and style. At the end of the lesson, you will be able to understand and identify the theme, point of view, and style in literary works. But before we start, why don't we have some music while you go and grab a pen and paper? Because at the end of today's lesson, there will be a quiz again. Let us join Miss Claasen's class as they learn more about literary terms.
Good morning, class. Are you ready to learn about some other literary terms used in literature? I sure hope so. Today, we are first going to look at the theme of literary works.
Theme as in theme?
Yes. The central or main idea or message in a literary work is called a theme. Theme. This is mostly implied through the actions of the characters and by the nature of conflict and its resolution. Examples of themes can be love, ambition, or war.
Oh, so theme of the pearl is material wealth?
Not really, Angela. In this novel, you can find many themes as the author is having different main messages. One main theme is corruption by material wealth. The struggle of survival is also a theme for this novel, as well as oppression and social class.
Ma'am, meaning a novel and short story can have many themes?
Yes, sure, at times. However, sometimes it can be only one theme. The theme, as I said before, is the main idea or message in a story. Therefore, it depends on the story. Themes convey the message or messages of the writer and may contain his or her beliefs and opinions. If the main theme is good versus evil, the sub-themes might include corruption, oppression, survival. Wait, who can tell me from which point of view is the story told in The Pearl?
What do you mean, miss? What's point of view?
Class, the point of view refers to the position the writer takes when writing the story. The writer, who is also called the author, may choose to tell the story from the first-person position, using first-person pronouns such as I, or the third-person position such as they. An example of a second-person pronoun could be you. All these positions are called points of view. Writers use point of view to express the personal emotions of either themselves or their characters.
Sorry, ma'am. Okay, to recap, miss, the first person is when a story is told from a personal viewpoint, which is the third person, and I retell someone else's story. For example,
That's correct, Angela. When reading the story, you will clearly see from which position the author is telling the story, from the pronouns being used.
But ma'am, the author of The Pearl makes use of the words such as I, they, and you. I am not so sure from which point of view the story is told.
Well, in such cases, Kevin, we refer to the omniscient narrator, meaning it's an all-knowing author who knows all the thoughts, motives, and actions of the characters in the story.
can you repeat that, miss? What?
Omniscient. OMNISCIENT. Omniscient narrator. The author writes the story from knowing all the thoughts, motives, and actions of all the characters, and can thus make use of pronouns such as I, they, and you.
Ah, that is very interesting. So you have 4 types of point of view: first person, third person, second person, and lastly, omniscient narrator.
Absolutely. Shall we conclude with the mood of a story?
Oh my goodness, is there more?
Well, class, lastly, the mood. The persuasive atmosphere in the story is referred to as the mood. Authors use mood as a style to capture the interest of the reader. For example, humor, mystery, and adventure. The Pearl is a sad and dramatic novel that uses senses of greed and envy in today's world.
Ma'am, meaning the mood I feel when I'm reading the story. For example, how I felt miserable while reading this novel.
Yes, Kevin. You will either feel you want to know, as if it is a mystery, while reading a story, then the mood is mysterious. Or while reading, it feels you are on an adventurous trip, for example, then the mood is adventure.
I think I need to read more as I cannot really relate to you. I know, for example, that the Pearl is full of evil, which gives a dark mood, right?
Oh yes, definitely, Angela. The more you read different novels, the more you will experience different moods.
This is quite a lot to remember. Give me a second just to reflect on what I've learned
Shall
today,
we
miss.
summarize
what we have learned today? The lesson focused on furthering your understanding of literary terms. You learned about the theme, point of view, and style of literary works. The central or main idea or message in a literary work is called a theme. The point of view refers to the position the writer takes when writing the story. First person point of view is when a story is told from a personal viewpoint. The third person and I retell someone else's story. The omniscient narrator is an all-knowing author who knows all the thoughts, motives, and actions of the characters in the story. The persuasive atmosphere in the story is referred to as the mood. Authors use mood as a style to capture the interest of the reader. For example, humor, mystery, and adventure. Well, we've come to the end of today's lesson. Now it's quiz time. Here is the questions for today. Choose only one answer. In the following sentence, identified the point of view. The young boy knew that he was good at sport and could really contribute to the team and help them win. I really want to be part of this team, he thought to himself. A, third person. B, the omniscient narrator. C, first person. D, second person. Okay, here's the question again. In the following sentence, identify the point of view. The young boy knew that he was good at sport and could really contribute to the team and help them win. I really want to be part of this team, he thought to himself. A, third person. B, the omniscient narrator. C, first person. D, second person. Thank you very much, listeners. We've come to the end of today's program. Many thanks to our listeners for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed the program and that you've learned more about literary terms. Join us for our next program where we will discuss listening skills. Make sure not to miss our very last broadcast. From me, Jacqueline Gonzalez. Until next time, ciao, ciao.
The Education Radio Initiative is possible with support from the Ministry of Education as part of the Education and Training Sector Improvement Program.
Hello listeners, my name is Jacqueline Gonzalez. On this program, we aim to assist grade 8 learners as well as others who are interested in improving their English language skills. Our topic for today is about listening comprehension skills. At the end of the lesson, you will be able to listen for information, know what to expect in the final JSC exam for the listening exam paper, and identify keywords in listening comprehension questions. The listening part of the end of the year examination is relatively easy, but this does not mean that you take it lightly and do not prepare for it. Let's hear what Ms. Clausen has to say on the importance of listening skills.
Many learners think of listening as a skill that requires no thought or practice. As such, listening comprehension skill is often overlooked when preparing for the final examination. However, what many learners do not realize is that listening is one of the very fundamental skills in language learning, in addition to speaking, reading, and writing. As a child, you first develop your listening skills and take in the speech you hear before you develop other skills such as speaking, reading, and communicating.
So it is clear that we need to practice our listening skills on a daily basis to prepare ourselves for paper 3. Today's lesson will focus on tips on how to improve your listening skills and identify keywords in listening comprehension questions. But before we start, why don't we have some music, Mr. DJ, while you go and grab a pen and paper, because at the end of today's lesson, there will be a quiz again. Welcome back. I hope you are ready now. Let's start with our discussion. Listening comprehension is probably the most difficult task for almost all learners and should be practiced as often as possible. The most important thing is to listen. The next step is to find listening resources. Just the mere fact of you listening to the radio today is a good sign which shows you moving in the right direction. Shall we now listen to the tips given by our popular Miss Clausen to her class?
Right, as you all know, at the end of the year, you will write a listening comprehension examination paper, which consists of 20 marks with a duration of approximately 30 minutes. You can easily score full marks or very high marks if you pay carefully attention in today's class. What you should first note is that all questions will be in English. Oh, so you think it's funny?
How many texts and questions will we receive in this paper, ma'am?
The listening comprehension paper consists of 2 sections, Kevin. Each section has various lengths of text which will be read twice. Part 1 has 5 short statements with questions requiring 1-word answers only. Each statement will be read twice and you should provide the answer immediately after the second reading. In this part, it is important that you underline key words in the question to identify the answer easily. If the question is, what time will the bus leave? You should immediately listen out for a time. You should glance through the set of questions for which you will be hearing. Then read the questions and find out what specific information is required. Is it a name, a place, a date, or a number? Circle the key words or the clue or trigger words. And when the reading or tape starts, listen intently when you think your specific information will come. For example, number 1, Kevin is arriving at London. At what time? Dave will be waiting for Kevin at. Number 3, Kevin will be wearing a. Number 4, Dave will be accompanied by. And lastly, number 5, Kevin is coming for. It is obvious from above that the key word for 1 is at, and you will be writing time. In 2, you will write a place. In 3, clothes. In 4, person accompanying Dave. And in 5, the purpose of the visit. So you have already guessed what to listen for.
Am I allowed to underline the keywords before the statements are being read?
Absolutely, Angela. You will be given time to read the questions before the statements are read to you. During that time, you may underline the key words for the information you need to listen out for. Now, part 2 of the first section is 5 multiple questions or true-false questions that will be asked. For this section, you need to underline key words which can provide you the most suitable answer from the multiple choice options. Remember to read the statement carefully before deciding which is the most suitable answer. Try and listen attentively during the first reading so that you can listen during the second reading whether you've made the right choice. For the true and false question, you need to underline the key information which will make the statement either true or false.
So, ma'am, I make my decision again during the first reading and listen attentively during the second reading whether I have made the right choice?
Yes, Kevin, that's correct. The second reading should preferably be the opportunity given to make sure whether you've given the correct answer. Okay, for section 2, there are also 2 parts. Part 1, you will need to respond to questions requiring short answers. During this part, underline the key words again and ensure that your answers are short. You are not required to give lengthy answers, so don't waste your time to write full sentences.
So, basically, your answers should only be for what the questions ask.
Sure, answer only what is required. For example, why do African women prefer to wear pants? You don't need to answer. African women prefer to wear pants because... No, you only give the reason. They feel powerful. So, First, you underline the word why African women prefer to wear pants. Okay? You should note that you need to provide a reason. So when listening to the text, you should listen out for the reason given from the reading.
Ma'am, what about part 2?
Okay, now part 2 of section 2. You will have to respond to questions requiring you to write sentence length answer, including some application. This basically means you will hear the answer straight from the text. You will have to apply the answer from what you have heard. For example, were the learners happy with the results of the test? If in the text it states that students were complaining and boycott the results, your answer should state that the learners were not happy as they were complaining and boycotted the results.
Meaning I have to listen attentively and try to understand the text and the message of the text to answer correctly.
Oh yes, Kevin, you will have to make sure you are listening to every word and make sure you have underlined the key or the clue words to ensure you are listening for the specific information. And very important, try to answer during the first reading.
Hectic. Sure, miss. Will it be possible, since the reading can be fast and you might not get time to write all answers down?
Therefore, Angela, do not answer first in pencil, as pencil answers are not accepted, and you might not get time to rewrite your answers in ink. Try your level best to write your answers as quickly as possible. And this takes practice. So, listen to English programs on the radio at least half an hour a day. 2 things are important. Radio, not TV. Because TV is visual. Plus scenes and visuals easily distract us. The next important thing is listen and not just hear.
Up to the sky, jump to the sky, up to the sky.
Let's sum up what we have learned today. We learned about listening comprehension today to better prepare you for the listening part of the end of the year examinations. Listening is a skill like any other which requires regular practice to master. To improve your listening, make sure that you know what specific information is required from a written text, even before reading it. Circle or note down keywords. Listen carefully to the first time a passage or writing is read. Take your first notes using keywords to record the important information. Use the second reading to confirm what you have noted. The listening comprehension exam consists of 2 parts. Part 1 is for short answers only, and you need to only give the required answer. Part 2 is for long answers, where you have to write down sentences for the answers and even apply keywords and sentences written in your own words. Well, we've come to the end of today's lesson. Now it's quiz time. Here is the questions for today's program. Choose only one answer. Listen to the following statement and then answer the question. When should you answer the questions during a listening exams? Is it A, during the second reading? B, during the first reading, C, at the beginning of the first reading, or D, at the end of the second reading? Oh, okay. Here's the question again. Listen to the following statement and then answer the question. When should you answer the questions during a listening exam? A. During the second reading, B. During the first reading, C. At the beginning of the first reading, D. At the end of the second reading. Thank you so much. We've come to the end of today's program and series. I hope you've enjoyed the series and good luck with your upcoming exams. From me, Jacqueline Gonzalez, until our next series, goodbye.
The Education Radio Initiative is possible with support from the Ministry of Education as part of the Education and Training Sector Improvement Program.